Hi there. Today I thought I would kind of go over the process that I use to create the battery cables for R2's feet. I did a couple of them several months ago. Kind of been putting off doing the others. I just never really got around to it, but figured it would be worth kind of showing the process a little bit. So in order to do this, I purchased a 5-foot length of braided fuel line cable. This is AN6 size. This is what most of the builders on Astromech like to use. This 5-foot length was less than $20, and it's enough to do all four. What I do is I basically cut this to about a 12-inch length for each one of the hoses. In addition, within the Mark III files for the Baddeley Droid, one of the other droid builders had created an AN6 sized knurled cable fitting, I guess you could call it. You can find these in the Mark III directory under legs and feet, the drive units and outer feet. You'll see the file there. So I printed a total of 8 of them. These have just been painted in flat black. And what I did on the previous time, or the previous ones that I did, is I just used a little bit of silver rub and buff, and I just kind of lightly highlighted this, almost like dry brushing for the technique. And I thought from a distance it really gives a good appearance. And then I also, since these cables are silver, I actually used some of this autumn gold rub and buff, and I just wiped a little bit of that along the outside to kind of give it the coppery color, and that worked really well. So the first thing that I need to do is cut this to length. And one of the things that you will notice if you pick this up, this is the uncut length from the factory. This metal braiding really frays out a lot, and it becomes pretty sharp and pretty difficult to work with. It comes taped off a little bit. What I found when I was working with mine was I needed to wrap it a couple times really well with some duct tape, and then I also put a zip tie right up close to where I was going to cut it. It's important that you do this to keep it from fraying so that it's workable, because eventually you're going to fill this little area here with epoxy, and you'll put that fitting in there, and it's just going to be really difficult if that's fraying out. So this one I've already cut, and this one here is about ready to cut. So I measured my 12 inches, I wrapped some tape around there, and then I've added 2 zip ties reasonably close together. I want to be able to cut once through this and have it end up being close to these, as close as possible to the zip ties. And to cut it, I just have a cutting disc bit on my Dremel, and I'll just go through that. It does tend to throw a lot of particles and sparks and stuff because this is a metal braiding, so make sure that you use the necessary safety equipment. Let me cut that, and I'll be right back. All right, so I've cut the 2 lengths of the hose, and I've removed one of the cable clamps on that end. Let me actually do it on this end as well. The tape will be enough to hold it for a few minutes. If you're not going to get around to installing the connectors, then just leave the cable ties on if it's going to sit for any extended period of time. I've got basically a 5-minute clear epoxy here. So let's mix a little bit of this up. And we're going to get a little bit of this down inside the fitting. This is going to be a tight fit, but it will fit. All right, so you can see now that's set on there really well. And now able to peel the tape right off. That is on there pretty well. Go ahead, do the other one as well. And there it is. So we're going to let that sit up for a good while. And we do need to install or glue in the magnets for those. But overall, that worked out pretty well. So I'm going to go ahead and do the second one, and then we'll finish it up from there. So one of the next things we have to do is we need to install the magnets that are going to hold these hoses in place. These, I think, are all 5mm magnets. You get a huge bag of these. There's several sources for them. They're pretty strong. They can be a little bit difficult to work with, especially getting them into some tight places like that. One of the things, though, that I wanted to do when I did my hoses is I wanted to make sure that no matter what hose you put where or in which orientation, the polarity of the magnets on both ends was the same. Anytime I'm dealing with the magnets, I always have to double and triple check and make sure continuously that they're in the correct orientation. So these here are all of the little parts that connect to the hoses that are attached to the feet. I've got a stack of magnets here, and I can see exactly which surface needs to be facing outward. So to keep track of that is really important while you're doing this. And my approach generally has been, again, to mix a little bit of 5-minute epoxy. I'll take a toothpick, I'll line the inside walls of the little cavity there for the magnet, and then I will carefully remove the magnet from the stack. This would be the side that I wanted to have down in the epoxy. So I'll usually put a little bit of epoxy on that side of the magnet so that when I drop it in here, in case it has a tendency to flip over, then I'll at least be able to see which side should be down. And then you can usually kind of push it in there with your fingers. I'm not too concerned if any epoxy kind of pulls up around the edge. It's just going to make sure that it holds it in place really well. And yeah, that's basically the process for doing that. And then if everything is correct, when you have these connections, it'll be in the correct orientation for it. So I'm going to go ahead and install the magnets in these, and then we'll be ready to do the rub and buff. And that's it. What's in there? So now that all of the epoxy work is done, all these really need is the finishing touches. For that, we're going to use our autumn gold rub and buff and a little bit of our silver rub and buff. So this stuff is kind of interesting to work with. A little bit goes a very long way. For some of this, I like to use a paper towel to apply it because it's going to get on your fingers and it will be everywhere. This is a wax-based product. So I've also found that it takes some time for it to sort of cure or dry fully. So in this case, I really just want just the tiniest little dab on there. That might even be kind of a lot. Kind of spread it out a little bit and just very, very lightly kind of a little across the top there. You'll see a couple of spots there. It actually went on a little bit heavy, but overall that works pretty well. And better to just keep applying lighter coats. Like this will probably want a little bit more on the end. So we'll just take the tiniest little dab again. On the ends of the first ones, I went a little bit heavier on that because I wanted it to, the appearance that it was metal. So we'll do a little bit more. Now for the next few hours, if you were to touch this, it would come off on your hands. So again, you want to be very, very careful with it. The overall effect, I think, is really pretty good. So with that one done, we'll go ahead and do the others, and then we'll work on the copper. All right, so the silver is done, at least for this first pass. I might give this some time to kind of cure up for a little bit. It's a little bit less pronounced. I'm not sure which I prefer. I actually kind of think I like the lighter application a little bit more, but I can always add to it a little bit more later. So now that we're ready to do the hose itself, we'll find a clean bit of paper towel. Now for this, it's obviously going to take a bit more, but still not a whole lot. And with this stuff, it's always better to err on the side of caution and do a little bit less than you think you need, because you can always add more. Taking it off is a little bit tougher. The end result here is enough to give it that different color, so that you can see the before and the after. So let me finish that up, finish up the other one, and then we'll be back. So after applying the rub and buff, these guys are pretty much done, and they're gonna just sit for a couple of days while everything dries and cures on them. This is just one of many ways to tackle the hoses. Some folks like to get the braiding separately and wrap that over just some plastic hose. Some people actually use pre-made hoses from the hardware store. There's lots of different ways, as with also at everything in droid building, but this is the way that seemed to work well for me, and I'm overall pretty pleased with the results. So I hope this helps, gives anyone else some inspiration for finding some other interesting ways of doing it. Please be sure to reach out and let me know if you have any suggestions or thoughts on alternate ways to do this.